And welcome back to the Alexandrian Codex. I'm Alex. This is Sword of the Stars. We are still reading through the lore because there's so goddamn much of it, and I think it's good. I feel like it's a little gratuitous at certain points, but the lore that it establishes is actually quite compelling. And the amount of thought given, this would be a pretty fucking good role-playing setting. Tabletop role-playing setting. I would love to see a non-4X game put in this system. The Lear are my favorite fucking faction. I'm gonna have to fight the urge to play as them. Space dolphins that teleport, and they're psychic, and they're just badass. We are the singers, and a part of the great song. So too are you. Why then do you bring war to the Lear? Can you not hear the mind scream when the black void crushes breath and warmth from a living shell? Why do you bring us the music of blood, of pain, of fire and death? Why do you come to these waters carrying death in your mouth? And how many of you must we kill in order to be at peace? The Lear are an air-breathing aquatic species, bearing a strong resemblance to extinct cetaceans. Wait, cetaceans? Cetaceans? God damn it, I had somebody tell me how to pronounce this like a month ago and I forgot. Google!
Cetacean.
Cetacean. Alright, thank you, Google. Cetacean. I was right, it's not cetacean, it is cetacean. They are the result of long-term processes and environmental change. An ice age lasting millions of years initially allowed for the development of mammalian species on an isolated tropical island. Huge ice shields of their homeworld, but eventually an extended warming period resulted in a planet of less than 10% of its surface above water. The vast majority of land-dwelling species returned to the sea, including the early ancestors of the Lear. The Lear have not been a starfaring species for long. Up until 150 years ago, the Lear were a peaceful race with limited technology. Vigorous agrarian and nomadic cultures operated within the rich waters of their homeworld, and war was virtually unknown. Although they had not developed in the sciences of architecture or ballistics, some Lear societies were extremely advanced in bioengineering, aquatic horticulture, volcanic engineering, and metallurgy. The Lear were conquered and enslaved by another starfaring race, who they learned to call the Sul-Ka. The Sul-Ka established several lucrative industries on Mur, the Lyrian homeworld, and force-marched the Lyrians through the Industrial Revolution by employing them as slaves in mines, factories, and manufacturing facilities. Yeah, here's the fucked up thing though. The Sul-Ka, they're just Lear. They're just other Lear. They're just really old Lear. Lear, when they get to be thousands and thousands of years old, turn into Lovecraftian monsters. And the Sul-Ka was just ancient Lear, enslaving the whole race through the use of psionics, and forcing them through an industrial revolution. That lore isn't introduced until Sword of the Stars 2, but it's pretty fucking cool. After several decades of abuse, realizing the greed and rapacity of the Sul-Ka would destroy the aquatic environment of their homeworld completely, the Lear rebelled against their alien masters. The war was remarkably bloody in the early stages, but finally ended when the Lear unleashed a bioweapon tailored to Sul-Ka physiology on Mur. It's impossible at this point to say what agent the Lear must have used, what vectors it followed. We only know that the resulting disease was so virulent and lethal, it appears to have quickly spread beyond the colony and completely eradicated the Sul-Ka, at least from that sector of space. The current state of Lyrian technology is the result of successful rebellion. The former slaves of the Sul-Ka quickly absorbed the abandoned technology of their masters and have adapted the old drives, guns, and orbital elevators for their own use. Driven by natural curiosity and desire to preempt any further assaults from the stars, the Lear have now begun exploring space. Lyrian ships of the line have very high mass-to-size ratio. Their ships must be filled with super-oxygenated liquid medium to allow the Lear to breathe and move quickly. Fortunately, their unusual system of propulsion employed by the Lyrian fleet allows them to compensate for the colossal mass of their vessels. The Lear use an inertialess stutter drive, which moves through space by teleporting the entire ship in tiny spatial increments of a millimeter or so. The implications of this drive system are many. For example, a Lyrian drive does not have to use thrust to accelerate, decelerate, or maneuver. It also allows for the mass of a Lyrian ship to be a non-issue, as the ship never develops the inertia of a body in motion, it simply changes its space-time coordinates. The speed of a Lyrian vessel is determined by the number of teleports per second that its engine can perform. It's not difficult for the Lyr to achieve relativistic speeds in open space, but the stutter drive has a distinct disadvantage when operating in a gravity well. Any object massive enough to cause a large space-time destruction, be it a planet, star, black hole, can severely slow the movement of Lyrian ships. The Lyr are an unusual species in more ways than one. Their bodies are sleek and dynamic, allowing for fast movement in water. Although they appear relatively smooth, their skins are in fact coated with a layer of dense, fine fur. Patterns and colors which will vary from the individual. They bear live young. All members of the species are hermaphroditic, possessing both female and male sex organs. The majority of Lyr are capable of fertilizing as a male or bearing young as a female, but only the very oldest Lyr can do both at once. It's normally impossible for a Lyr to impregnate as a male while carrying an offspring itself. A newborn Lyr is very small, less than half a meter in length and weighing only 8 to 10 kilograms. By the time they reach the age of majority, after a period of roughly 50 years, a standard Lyr will be around 3 meters long and weigh approximately 120 kilograms. There seems to be no natural end to their potential lifespan of any given Lyr. They're fucking immortal, they're crazy, and throughout their lives, a Lyr never stops growing. Some observers have reported sightings of an elder Lyr over 60 meters long, massing many tons. The most unusual feature of the Lyrian race is not the shape of their bodies, however, but the power of their minds. Lyr do not have opposable digits, tentacles, or any other physical means of manipulating objects. They employ a limited form of telekinesis instead. A deaf Lyr can lift several tools at once, and can operate many simple mechanisms simultaneously. While with some concentration, they can also hurl objects with astonishing force. The spear was a traditional hunting weapon among the Lyr for many centuries. Although they have large, light-sensitive eyes, the frequency range of Lyrian vision is limited. They have very refined sense of taste and sophisticated array of sound-producing and sound-receiving equipment, however, which more than compensate for the lack of sight. Lyrian echolocation is good enough to allow Lyr to draw very sophisticated schematics of any machine or device simply by singing to it, and reading the sound waves that bounce back. The Lyr communicate largely by telepathic means, although they do have some very rudimentary sound-like signals that convey strong but simple emotions, being startled, amused, frightened, angry, etc. They don't have tentacles, but they do have these weird face tentacle things going on, and some of their exosuits do have prehensile tentacles that they end up using, so even though the flavor is like, no tentacles, I'm seeing some things that look distinctly like tentacles. Culturally speaking, the Lyr have a strong pacifistic streak, and are inclined to avoid violence. Up until recently, the very notion of a war was unknown to them. They don't war amongst themselves historically, and have had difficulty grasping concepts like conquest, or understanding why such a thing would be desirable. Because of their empathic and telepathic ability, the Lyr are always keenly aware of the suffering of others. They take no joy in causing pain, fear, or anger. They revere life and harmony, abhor the needless death or destruction. Nonetheless, they also value their own lives, and over the past 2 centuries have come to embrace survival as a necessary virtue. The Lyr are extremely curious and quick to learn, and have made astounding strides with technology of various kinds in very short periods of time. Their masters of back engineering, the combination of telekinetic tool use, their ability to form 3-dimensional schematics of any machine without having to disassemble it, have proven to be powerful advantages. And although most of the weapons in their arsenal are easily recognizable, the unique character of their species does tend to show in the battle tactics. Lyr have a tendency to encircle their enemies, forming an attack ring which allows them to assault the target from several sides at once. It's analogous to the standard treatment of predator species on their homeworld, which are dispatched in a similar fashion. Lyr will always target an enemy's engines if possible, not only to spare the lives of the crew, but to preserve any useful technologies or data that might be gleaned from the undamaged remains of the ship. Their reverence for life has given them a strong aversion to high-explosive weapons, and they dislike indiscriminate bombardment of planets. When Lyr attack, they strike with surgical precision. Lyr achieve Elder status, after having lived more than 300 years. At this point, they're over 5 meters in length and usually weigh well over 200 kilograms. Weir who have reached this venerable age generally retire from any profession which might put them personally at risk, and adopt a monastic lifestyle. In general, their days are spent contemplating the mysteries of the universe, composing songs, poems, maintaining oral tradition of the species, and instructing the young in matters of ethics, morality, and proper conduct as a sentient being. No Weirian philosopher is taken seriously before the age of 400. Any given elder will usually be surrounded by a cloud of younger Weir who listen to the songs, ask questions, and telepathically explore the complexities and subtleties of the elder's mind. This period of swimming alongside is considered a vitally necessary part of any young person's education. The aged are highly revered in all Weirian subcultures, and younger Weir will gladly sacrifice their own lives or embrace great personal risk to protect an elder from any possible harm. Their ancestors are living treasures in their eyes. A sizable number of Weir spacers regard their service as a duty to the species and volunteer to scout the empty sea in order to protect the elders who must remain behind on Myr. Well, you know, they're psychic, right? So it's a little iffy. Like, wait, if they were enslaved by just ancient Weir, how did the Weir forget about this? I think it's kind of hand-waved off as they forgot, or they intentionally didn't remember, or the stories were intentionally forgotten, or something like that. It was a little weird. If I ever get around to streaming Sword of the Stars 2, we can look into it then, but for the time being, the Zul'Ka are just like weird things that enslaved us. We don't know it was other Weir yet. It's not canon at this point. In recent years, a revolution of thought and communication has occurred among the Weir. Up until very recently, the Weir only had limited notions of spoken language. For eons, vocalizations existed only to aid in perception, convey emotion, or for aesthetic appreciation. A traditional Weirian song is an art form which has a character of both music and painting. The words or lyrics of ancient songs are received telepathically by the audience. The challenge of commanding and controlling a fleet of starships, however, has forced the Weir to develop new modes of communication. A new class of Weirian singers have recently emerged, and now they sing an entirely new type of song. These Weir can now shape sequences of gross physical sounds, which are meant to be broadcast by mechanical means. This is an unnecessary quotation mark, and can be heard at far greater distances than even the strongest telepathic shout can travel. Once they developed the concept of fleet song and created a code of physical sounds which were analogous to concepts and strings of ideas which would normally be spoken telepathically, the Weir were easily able to grasp the concept of spoken language among other non-telepathic species. Since most of the species they come into contact with do not possess even the most rudimentary telepathy, they begin to assemble the cadre of Weirian specialists who would dedicate their lives to learning the fleet songs of other species. These specially trained linguists communicate verbally with other species, develop software to translate any spoken Weirian language into Weirian fleet song. There's no traditional word for such a profession among the Weir, but they've invented a new title for the job. Members of the diplomatic corps are now called Singers to the Deaf. Yeah, I want to play the Weir. I convinced myself. They're just fucking cool. Give you that, and I don't know, blue, yeah. No, they're too cool not to play. I can't do it. I'm gonna not play as the most overpowered faction for once. No, never mind, they're cool. I love damn near everything about them. The Zul I hate. I have never enjoyed playing. They have some real effed up mechanics, but they're interesting. The time has come. We can wait no longer for the great masters to return. Our numbers grow daily. Our children must have meat. This galaxy is unworthy of its god, overrun by ignorant, arrogant slaves. It's time to teach them their place in the great scheme. They would learn to serve their betters or die. As we were commanded, so it shall be done. We will sweep all enemies from our path in the darkness of this galaxy. We will forge an empire of light, born of fire Born of steel, born of science, born of blood. Did I pick the Pokeball symbol for the... Are you calling this one the Pokeball symbol? The purple one? The purple one's looking the closest to a Pokeball. Yeah, I can go with that. The Zool are a race of spacefaring marsupials. Human spacers have dubbed this species the Rippers for a number of reasons. Not least because of the savagery of their attacks on Sulforce colonies. Zool have been present in this region of space for a number of years and have been known to make guerrilla attacks on the colonies of all other sentient races. Because those attacks seldom left behind any survivors to tell the tale, little was known about the raiders. Their physiology, technology, and motives remained a mystery for many years. More recently, however, the numbers of Zool in the region seem to have increased exponentially. Their tactics have changed. Sulforce has begun to encounter larger and larger contingents of Ripper ships that are willing to engage their enemies head-on. As captured prisoners, combat difficulties, and salvage Ripper technologies have all become available to the Sulforce Science Corps. A number of disturbing discoveries have been made. First and foremost, it's been conclusively proven the Zool are not the product of natural evolution. These savage marsupials are the result of profound and sophisticated genetic tampering by the Leer, by the Zoolka. It was by the same people who enslaved the Leer. They seem to have been shaped by bioscience, which far who's really good at bioscience? Surpasses that of any known race. Although it's nearly impossible to say what sort of creatures the Leer served to face stock for the Rippers, or what kind of race created them. It was the Leer. We do know that the number of their natural attributes have been enormously enhanced. Rate of reproduction, tendency to aggression, intelligence, and psionic abilities have all been artificially increased, and the latter two qualities seem to be increasing further with each generation. If only for a few decades, the Zool have gone from a smattering of disorganized raiding parties to a large, organized, and coordinated fighting force. Although the location of their central base is currently unknown, Sulforce has gleaned some valuable information on the history of the Rippers from the ruins of the planet Iridia 5. Please see additional notes at the end of this briefing. Zool ships appear to be assembled from components that were once part of other structures. Very often, their vessels are made up of parts torn from different sources. Bits and pieces of enemy ships, colonial storage crates, even ore carriers and water pods are all made to serve a single Zool destroyer. The disparate parts are crudely welded together into a serviceable whole. Examination of derelict Ripper vessels reveals bits and pieces stolen from many species. Fragments can be identified by nose art or serial numbers. It's somewhat disturbing to note very often these random chunks were taken from a vessel lost in a battle with a species other than the Zool. From this evidence, it would seem Rippers have visited the scene of many battles after the main combatants had departed to comb through the drifting debris to look for anything, or anyone, they could put to use. The only technology unique to the Zool is their FTL drive, which is based on an unknown branch of gravikinetic theory, the so-called Rip Drive. Uses a focused energy event to create a miniature black hole. This artificial singularity creates a tiny tear in the fabric of spacetime, penetrating the subspace or node space layer. What begins as a small puncture immediately opens to a larger rip, a new gravimetric stress fracture which quickly forms a channel between the closest massive stellar body and that of a neighboring star system. Any given Ripper ship can detect and travel along these space-time tunnels. Once they're open, the rip lanes eventually form a network not unlike the naturally occurring node lines followed by human vessels. Unlike node lines, however, a rip lane is not a stable connection. These lanes have a tendency to collapse over time. Zool weapon systems, like the hulls of their starships, often appear to have been torn from the ships of other races or back-engineered and adapted for use after having been salvaged. The Zool have a number of physical characteristics that are unusual in a sentient race. There's a high degree of sexual dimorphism within their species, enormous physical and psychological differences between males and females. Zool also undergo unusual cycle development from birth to adulthood because there are such extreme differences between male and female Zool as adults, and between all adult Zool and their offspring in the early phases. Zool families seen together might easily be misconstrued as 4 or 5 separate species. Nonetheless, there are some general statements which apply to all Rippers. They are species of a non-placental mammal, warm-blooded and oxygen-breathing with a high very high metabolic and reproductive rate. They thrive in a variety of conditions and adapt with an alarming speed to nearly any set of environmental challenges. Zool of both sexes and all ages are covered in a thick coat of hair. Colors vary with the individual. This fur will be considerably less dense on the adult male, and the coat may be greatly reduced in length and thickness on hotter worlds. Zool of all ages are omnivores and have a taste for carrion. This is especially true in early childhood. A growing Zool consumes many times its own weight in meat per day. Some xenobiologists speculate the Zool were bred from a rootstock of carrion-eating predators, which may partially account for the extremely high resistance they have to infection, especially from bacterial pathogens. Zool of all ages also possess a rudimentary telepathic ability, which is strongest in the adult male. The crude telepathic communication is the basis for a basic Zool social unit, which Soulforce has dubbed the coterie. The coterie is an instinctive behavior pattern for the Zool species. All adult Zool are a member of a coterie, which usually consists of a group of 6 to 12 females and 1 male. The male Zool will take the dominant role and act as the single de facto brain for the entire unit. A coterie of Zool is a single unit for all intents and purposes, subject to the direction of a single will. In Zool society, the coterie, specifically its male, is considered the individual person. Despite their resistance to disease and natural intelligence, the maximum lifespan of the average Zool is not long. If he or she mates with no accidental or violent end, the Ripper metabolism is so high that most members of the species die of natural causes before the age of 40. The average Ripper male ranges in height from 85 to 125 centimeters, with a mass ranging 45 to 70 kilograms. Can't say that word, kilograms. Although far smaller than female cohorts, he is strong and agile, and very adept at climbing. All of his senses are acute, but his vision is particularly sophisticated, especially in comparison to females. Some scientists suggest that under primitive conditions, he was adapted to serve as the eyes of a hunting party, helping them track prey from an elevated position. Of all Zool, only the adult male is fully sentient in the modern sense of the word, he says, punching the mic. His forelimbs are equipped with long-fingered, sensitive hands with opposable thumbs. His punch claws are vestigial and do not interfere with tool use. His brain is much larger and more complex than that of a female Ripper. He's more intelligent and has more sophisticated telepathic ability. This large and complex brain is analogous to that of many other starfaring races, allows him to understand and communicate complex ideas. Unlike the females of his species, he has both telepathic and verbal language skills. With his dexterous hands, he can build and deconstruct various mechanical devices. So, yeah, very... Very interestingly sharp patriarchal shift we see with the Zool. With the Hivers and the Tarka, they're strongly matriarchal. The Tarka are a bit more complicated than straight up matriarchal, patriarchal, and the Lear are entirely hermaphroditic. The Zool they're patriarchal as fuck, is how it's reading right now, and it's really interesting that the one species clearly characterized as patriarchal is also characterized as being the most barbaric. The psionic ability of the male Zool is likely his most dangerous feature. Through a telepathic link, he can control the coterie of a much larger and stronger female Rippers. They obey his telepathic commands instantly and without reflection. The male Zool can also use telepathic coercion and interrogation on members of enemy species. For more information on the tendency of Zool raiders to kidnap sentient captives from enemy worlds, see intelligence gathering among the Zool at the end of this briefing. The Zool female is a massive creature, ranging in height from 150 to 220 centimeters and weighing in at roughly 175 kilograms. Her bones are highly dense and strong, hinting at the species' origin on a high-gravity world. Her muscular body is capable of leaping 2 or 3 times her own weight, or lifting and pressing up to 400 kilograms. Although she would normally stand and walk upright, her hips and spine are still not fully adapted to running on 2 legs. She would drop to all 4s when she wishes to move at speed. Her fangs are quite sharp, and her jaws are capable of exerting over 200 kilos of crushing force, but the female Zool's most dangerous physical weapons are undoubtedly 2 massive punch claws, which protrude from twin sheets on her forearms. These natural weapons may have evolved from digging claws, a primitive burrowing ancestor, but at present the claws are much more used to inflict catastrophic damage on enemy soldiers and equipment. With one swipe from her punch claws, a female Zool can disembowel a man in heavy armor or tear through half an inch of titanium. Empire Fading Suns. I think I had played that. I haven't played it in a while. Although her brain is small relative to that of a male, with a maximum mass of roughly 800 grams, the female Zool is a sensitive and intelligent beast in her own right. Her visual acuity seems to be limited, but her hearing and olfactory senses are quite sharp, and she also possesses a simple empathic ability. With the direction of a male, she is capable of sophisticated tool use, including the operation of heavy machinery. If the male of a Zool coterie is killed, however, the females remain highly dangerous. Even without direction, a group of female Zool is a hunting pack of very large and intelligent predators. They can always use simple weapons with some skill. Perhaps the most noteworthy aspect of a female Zool's physiology is her fertility cycle. An adult female is almost always pregnant, for want of a better word. She carries a full litter of embryonic Zool at all times. Although these offspring are conceived within her body, they emerge within 50 days from the aqueous environment of her tomb and are placed within a marsupial pouch for safekeeping. Up to a dozen of these Ripper proto-worms will be attached to her nipples at any given time. That's horrifying. Unlike other marsupials, the Zool female forcefully ejects her milk into the mouths of her offspring, while the eyeless worm-like pups nestle in the safety of her pouch. Unlike ordinary marsupials, however, or ordinary mammals for that matter, the milk of the Ripper female is not primarily intended to nourish her young. Instead, she secretes a narcotic fluid designed to keep her pouchlings dormant. They will remain effectively comatose until the flow of her milk is stopped, and will only awaken and begin to grow and develop when she has died or removed them from the pouch. Fucking what? Nah, it's a tomb. I said womb, but tomb. What the fuck? I don't remember this at all. Once the flow of milk to an undeveloped Zool has stopped, it quickly rouses from dormancy. The stage of a Ripper's life, the tiny infant has no eyes, no ears, and only vestigial limbs. The full length of its body, not more than 15 centimeters. Shaken from the sleep induced by its mother's milk, however, the infant Ripper will obey its one imperative: to eat. Within minutes, it will begin to devour all animal and vegetable matter in its path. Since they are used almost exclusively for hard and hazardous labor, it's not unusual for brooding female Zool to die while carrying a pouch full of young. If she does, the members of her coterie will not be concerned. The mother's own body immediately becomes a host for the proto-worm sleeping in her pouch. Upon awakening, the larval Rippers will tunnel through the flesh and bone of every particle of their mother is devoured. However, it's not necessary for a female Zool to die in order to provide nourishment for her children. She may also remove proto-worms from her pouch at any time, place them within the corpse of a fallen foe, or onto a mound of meat or vegetable matter she may have gathered for the purpose of feeding them. After an initial burst of growth, the infant Zool has an average length of 40 centimeters and a mass around 2 kilograms. Rippers at this age generally resemble members of the Terran family Mustelidae? Weasels, ferrets, etc., armed with sharp teeth and claws. The young Ripper will have keen sense and intelligence of a cat-like predator, combined with rudimentary telepathic sense. This very primitive instinctive telepathy allows the infant Zool to detect prey and to recognize other members of its own species. Jesus Christ. Yeah. Oh. Yeah, whoever genetically engineered this species are horrible, horrible people. And if it was the old space dolphins, yeah, I guess they are huge dicks. Jesus Christ, I don't remember any of this at all. Well, I'm glad I'm reading over this. I'm impressed and horrified. Following this instinctive drive, Zools of this age would normally form a nest within one or two other infants of the same sex and begin a life of hunting and stockpiling kills. Infant Rippers have a metabolism so high they only sleep very rarely. They must hunt constantly for the calories to keep their long, slender bodies warm and to support their rapid growth and development. There's no necessary relationship between infant and adult Zool at this phase. When living on the surface of a planet, it seems to be common practice for an adult Zool to abandon their offspring during infancy, to expose them to the elements, forcing them to adapt to the environment, or die. Some xenosociologists claim this is a cultural practice. The high rate of infant mortality may actually be deemed desirable, because only the fittest Zool will survive the ordeal. See the notes on Zool Society at the end of this briefing. There's a lot of notes at the end of this briefing. I mean, I can call them horrible people for kidnapping, genetically engineering, and turning a race of presumably non-cannibalistic marsupials into ravenous cannibalistic marsupials that, God, imagine how fucked up that would be, always being pregnant with something that will kill you if it can. That you have to keep the thing drugged in order not to eat you alive. That is some terrifying, terrifying stuff. Yep. It can take anywhere from 30 to 90 days from an infant Zool to complete the infant phase and enter the pre-adolescent phase of its development. At this stage, the average Zool has grown considerably, with a mass of a range to 20 to 50 kilograms. Males of this age will already be smaller than females, but Zool of all ages will have gone through significant physiological changes. The brain of a female Zool has nearly doubled in size at this point, already approaching the 800 grams of the adult. She's developed significant muscles and bone strength in her limbs and torso, can stand and walk upright when she chooses, will often launch herself and leap several times her own height to make a kill. Her two large punch claws are already her primary weapons used in hunting and self-defense against other Zool. The brain of the male at this age already weighs over a kilogram. It is increased in complexity by an order of magnitude. He will have roughly the intelligence and curiosity of a very young child from any other sentient species. He can walk upright, climb with great agility, especially if threatened. His underdeveloped punch claws are useless as weapons, but do not interfere with his manipulation of objects. He will become increasingly attracted to tool use at this age. His telepathic abilities will begin to flower at a phenomenal rate, allowing him to attract and communicate with females and form a coterie of his own. He will also begin to acquire the language skills to communicate with older males. It's at this point that the social relationship of Zool begin to evolve. The members of infant Zool nests tend to drift apart. If they're male, as the pre-adolescent Zool male instinctively seeks out a group of females to hunt and care for him. In the case of females, the pre-adolescent creatures tend to form even stronger bonds with their nest sisters and seek out other female Zool to join into larger groups. Zool females naturally form the empathic bonds of the coterie at this age and begin to hunt in coordinated packs. Acting in concert, a group of 6 to 12 female Zool can take down a prey animal much larger than themselves. If left to their own devices, Zool of this age will eventually form primitive coteries, with the pre-adolescent male providing guidance and direction to a group of females. However, this is also the age at which the adult males of the species will generally begin to take interest in their young. Some seek new females to fill gaps left in an adult coterie when one of the wives has been killed. Other males will take an interest in the fledgling males, taking them on as protégés. Regardless, it's unusual for any Zool to grow past the age of adolescence in a continued feral state. Most rippers that survive infancy are adopted as children and raised to adulthood as members of Zool society. Certain peculiarities in the male Zool's cognitive process must be understood before social characteristics of the species can be explained. The male Zool is an inexhaustibly curious animal, possessed by a hunger for knowledge, information, and understanding, which might be considered admirable, were it not so inimical. We can do this, Alex. Inimical to the interest of other sentient beings. Yeah, no, they're a very well designed weapon, but they're a self-aware weapon, which is inherently pretty unethical. Yeah, it's like creating a zombie virus or something, or being a necromancer or something like that. It's very smart. You're just 60% of the way done. Yeah, you're telling me. Where was I? From early childhood onward, the Zool... are driven to seek intellectual stimulation, but the common source of stimulation is rather horrifying to contemplate. Oh, good, great. There's a good deal of communication and cooperation among male Zool, who seem to share information and concepts very readily with one another by verbal and telepathic means. But over and above this cooperative education, male Zool take great pleasure in invading the minds of other sentient beings. Of course they do. Scouring them for information and knowledge by means of psionic interrogation. The process of harvesting information from an enemy's brain is emotionally painful, psychologically devastating, and ultimately destructive for the victim, often leaving large gaps in memory or cognitive function. Most Zool will try to draw out this process for as long as possible, not only because they find it diverting, but because it's more efficient to break down the victim's mind patiently over a period of months, oh my god, rather than tear it apart too quickly. The most gifted or educated the victim, the longer a Zool interrogator will try to extend the unraveling of the mind. A brilliant scientist or engineer is considered a prize among the Zool, and such a prisoner can expect to spend months or even years in an interrogation room. Okay, yep. When the mind of a captive has been ripped clean, the process leaves behind an empty shell. The victim's body is catatonic with no brain activity, simple autonomic levels. Typically, such a prisoner will then be turned over to female Zool to be eaten, or used as a host for Zool offspring. Not all captives taken prisoner by the Zool will be subjected to psionic interrogation. The vast majority, in fact, will simply become slaves. Although the mental strength of a Zool male varies, the Zool slave master is capable of overpowering psionic conversion. Former slaves of Zool often describe themselves as virtual automatons when subjected to the master's will, acting as ordered without being able to physically resist or consciously form a rational objection or emotional response to their own actions, even when forced to harm friends or loved ones. Ugly as it is to contemplate, these mental feeding habits of the male Zool are at the heart of a rapid technological and social advancement of their species. Through psionic coercion, the Zool have been able to use enemy prisoners to operate their own foreign technology, which has accelerated the back engineering of that technology to an incredible degree. Through psionic interrogation, the Zool have increased their fund of scientific and technical information by incalculable leaps and bounds, as well as by absorbing abstract notions which have helped shape their present society. Well, see, it's not a necromancer raising an army from the dead. That's not an inherently evil act. Poisoning an entire group of people so that they will die so that you can then raise them as zombies, that is more or less what this is. Giving people, or making a people who would otherwise be able to live full lives, a condition which turns them into a weapon, that's unethical, immoral. This is beyond a logical extreme. Yeah, okay. Assembling notes on the history and culture. It's kind of interesting. While reading over this, I'm definitely struck by subtle or not so subtle commentaries on intellectual patriarchy, pseudo-intellectualism, the idea, parasitic roles of certain social structures. Like, I'm not sure if this is a commentary, but if it is a commentary, it's a provocative one. Assembling notes on history and culture of the Zool has proven to be difficult for a variety of reasons. Very few Zool have been captured alive and taken prisoner. If those taken capture, only the males can be interrogated at all, and interrogating a male Zool presents a significant challenge to those without natural psionic defenses. Nonetheless, some details have emerged from early sessions with few Zool patriarchs who have chosen to cooperate with their captors. All sources agree, for example, that Zool society, as such, is a relatively recent phenomenon. The Zool species is extremely young. The entire race has existed in its current form for less than 100 years, since they were first created, and only unleashed on the unsuspecting inhabitants of the world we call Iridia 5, the Zool have been in constant state of flux. Only in recent decades have the various coteries of Zool formed a collective, organized society sharing common ideas and goals. Self-Force investigators were given the location of Iridia 5 by a Zool presently known by the codename Deacon. Iridia is a hot giant star surrounded by dense, high-gravity planetary bodies. By the time of their arrival, the ruins of the fifth planet had been abandoned by the Zool for a number of years, and most of the structures were in a state of weather-beaten disrepair. Nonetheless, with the help and guidance of Deacon, a team of crack xeno archaeologists were able to piece together the tragic history of the world and to find remains of its former occupants. Iridia 5 was the colonial outpost of an unknown alien species. To date, we have no name for this unknown race, so four scientists refer to them as Species X. Little is known about the physical or social nature of Species X. Even the remaining bone fragments left on Iridia 5 are rarely larger than 20 centimeters in length. We do know they were a star-faring race with an unknown means of faster-than-light propulsion. They settled on Iridia 5 after traveling a significant distance from their own homeworld. No other remains of civilization have been found in neighboring star systems, but they were not native to Iridia 5. The remains of Species X have been tested extensively for any resemblance to other life forms on the surface. There are only a handful of plants and animals on the surface that share more than 90% of the genome. It can be safely assumed these organisms were imported as part of a terraforming project to make Iridia 5 more livable. Examining the structures built by Species X suggests that the colony was a scientific research facility. The majority of resources appear to have been devoted to laboratories and machinery dedicated for high-energy research, possibly in the field of gravity manipulation. It may have been this research which first attracted the attention of Species Y, the creators of the Zool, or there may have been a pre-existing conflict between the two races. It's impossible at present to say. According to the testimony of Deacon, however, members of Species X did not expect to be attacked in any way and have made no effort to defend themselves. They may have even believed they were alone in the universe prior to first contact with another star-faring race. Regardless, it's clear to say that the first infant Zool appeared in the area. Species X did not immediately recognize the voracious creature as a deliberate attack. They were mistakenly regarded as an infestation of native pests. Species Y, however, had deliberately and maliciously dropped the first Zool on Iridia 5 with the intention of destroying Species X. The remains of drop pods have been found. Those were obviously released from a low orbit filled with live female rippers intended to die on impact with the planet's surface. not even bothering to try to land them safely, just drop them from orbit, they'll die, and then their little worm babies will eat them alive. Jesus Christ. Well, the Zool don't really save anything, though. The Zool were created to prevent the destruction of an empire universe when the sacrifice of a few people be worth the salvation of many, many more. Not really. The Zool just consume everything. In the long run, the creation of the Zool is a weapon that inadvertently and inevitably turns on its creators. It's a stupid tool. It's like somebody creating a zombie virus or creating a virulent plague or something like that is a desperate means of defending or attacking. It's a stupid fucking plan. Just like relying heavily on nuclear weapons or something like that. Inevitably, you'll end up just hurting yourself as much, if not more, than the people you mean for it to hurt. Yeah, they're very Zergy. They're very Tyrannidy. It was here that the original intentions of Species Y may have gone awry. We cannot see precisely what they meant to achieve when they first created the Zool, but it seems unlikely they realized the full potential of their creation. All we can say for certain is they dropped the Zool on the surface of Iridia 5, departed the scene, no evidence they ever returned. It seems probable they expected the savage Zool to survive only long enough to wipe out Species X. Could have expected this to take as long. The population of Iridia 5 was small and not at all prepared to defend itself. Thereafter, it probably would have been logical to assume the Zool would rapidly die out, exhausting very limited resources of a bleak, half-terraformed world in a very short order. The Zool, by nature, a rapacious and highly aggressive species, should have quickly eaten Iridia 5 down to the bedrock and then suffocated when the last of its oxygen-producing plants were destroyed. When the scientists of Species Y were tinkering with intelligence and psionic capabilities of Zool, however, they may not have realized the fascination the male Zool would have had for the minds of potential victims. It's horrifyingly obvious from the evidence found at Iridia 5 that survivors of Species X were not quick in dying. The majority were not eaten until years or even decades after the first generation of Rippers reached adulthood. Instead, these colonists were held captive, enslaved, studied, and mind-raped by primitive forebears of modern Zool. who instead used the alien scientists and their advanced technical knowledge to build first ships with which fledgling Rippers would reach the stars. Seriously, how stupid do you have to be to genetically engineer this? Ah, what a good weapon! And it steals... The psionic part is where you just really fuck up. Like, oh yeah, I can steal knowledge from enemy minds. No! No, you don't want your weapon to become increasingly more intelligent. That's a horrible idea. Yeah, well, the orcs in 40K were originally led by intelligent creatures, right? Who kind of directed their mindless savagery. It wasn't Gork and Mork. It was the old ones, the fucking frogs. Oh my god, what are they called? You probably know what I'm talking about. Yeah. Yeah, I love Warhammer 40K Deep Lore. It's good shit. The length of time that some of the species X captives remained alive is astonishing. It seems to indicate this race may have had some natural inborn resistance to psionic invasion or attack. Many decades later, all remaining species of Species X are now long gone. It's impossible to even piece together a partial skeleton from their race. Nonetheless, in a very real sense, both Species X and Species Y were the parents of the modern Zool. In Ripper cosmology, the contributions of both species are regarded as sacred. To say that Zool society is male-dominated would be a grotesque understatement. Among Zool, females are regarded as beasts at best. In general, a male sees members of his coterie as expendable tools, treats them as he might treat a body part that can be easily and painlessly replaced. When Rippers meet in social situations, females are generally concealed from view, draped with cloth in order to crouch inconspicuously until they're useful. Society, such, consists of only male Zool. At present, the race is organized into a loose theocracy. All Ripper males are members of a single religion, motivated by a single set of ideals and goals which are the tenets of this religion. Modern Zool recognize themselves as an artificial species. Their own artificial origin fascinates them, and they've developed an obsessive desire to find the race they call the Creators or the Great Masters. It's the belief of modern Zool that every aspect of their nature represents a deliberate and purposeful choice on the part of the creators, who made them strong, rapacious, intelligent, etc., in order to serve a part of a greater scheme. They would like to have the details of the scheme revealed to them, and most Zool appear to believe that their creators will reappear and explain a great many things about the universe and the Zool's place within it, within the creations have somehow proved their worth. Accordingly, all Zool venturers into space conceived as part of a great crusade, a quest for knowledge and power which will ultimately lead the Rippers to their celestial fathers, the scientists of Species Y. Opinions seem to differ on whether the creators are planning to return at some point of their own accord, or whether the Zool are expected to find them in some colossal cosmic game of hide-and-seek. Regardless, until they meet the creators face to face, the Zool believe it's their sacred and divine right to act on the imperatives that all males of the species seem to share. They believe they're obligated and entitled to satisfy their relentless curiosity and thirst for knowledge on the one hand, and to enslave and destroy the weaker, less worthy species that populate the universe on the other. To the Zool, the meaning of the universe and all living things in it are generally regarded as mother. Like Species X, all things mother are worthless and meaningless in and of themselves. Despicable and weak as it may be, however, that which is mother is nevertheless the wellspring of life, a fecund bed of resources, destined to be ripped apart and devoured in order that the divine masculine spark can come to exist. Fucking hell. By contrast, that which is considered pure, admirable, and worthy of respect in some ways, usually considered masculine, given the attributes of father. God, they're just so detestable. They're so detestable. The only currency of the Ripper economy is information. The wealth and influence of any given Zool is measured by the number of ships and slaves he can control. Intelligence and strength of mind is highly valued. Higher status is generally conferred upon those with the strongest psionic abilities. Rank among Zool tend to be analogous to the organization of a religious base. More influential Zool hold their positions by charismatic power of will, as well as the ability to educate and enlighten others. Father, lord, master are the common terms of respect used by those addressing a superior. Brother is one how addresses an equal, and son is the term one uses to address an inferior. The highest ranking members of Zool society hold titles equivalent to that of a bishop or cardinal, and the nearest human equivalent to the Zool's great father would probably be an ancient pharaoh or pope. The orders given by high-ranking Zool are obeyed without question. There's a good deal of debate how long this unity and cooperation among the Zool can last. Given the rate at which Rippers seem to be absorbing information and ideals from alien captives, some kind of social breakdown or schism is a definite possibility. Even the current organization of Zool society seems to be a perverse, distorted view of religious and social norms which were somehow ripped from other races. Just a few new ideas could have such a sweeping, far-reaching effect on the culture, a few more could easily reduce their species to internecine war. Every sentient race has seen how easily a new idea can become a new ideology. Their hunger to swallow the souls of new races, the Zool may eventually bite off much more than they can chew. Fuck, that was 50 minutes. I'm doing the Marigi before I put in a cut here. Well, they implanted an undying morality. I'm only making this, it was a bad idea judgment because of what happens in Sword of the Stars 2. The Marigi are pretty dope. Hi, welcome to Alex Just Reads Lore about this game for 2 hours. Oh, sweet Jesus. We are the Travelers, the tribes of the Starborn. We rise like a new-fledged phoenix from the ashes of ruin, stretching forth to reclaim the sacred stars. If you would see our faces, look to your own dreams, your legends, and tales of times long past. There you will find us, burning bright. Your ancestors offered us tribute and honor, but you have forgotten us and the old ways. You disturb the graves of our fathers, murdering our sisters and wives, and give us no choice but to serve you a chalice of blood. Of the sentient species still living in the sector of the galaxy, the Marigi are one of the most ancient, and have long recorded histories of interstellar travel. Initially known only by a unique configuration of their low orbital attack drones, the Marigi were named Crows by the first human spacers to encounter them. These craft have an aerodynamic, avian shape and a swooping attack pattern, which brought to mind the predatory scavengers of old Earth. In recent years, more intensive investigation by Soulforce Intelligence has revealed the nickname Crow was curiously apt in many respects. The Marigi have many traits in common with legendary Crow or Raven of old Earth. Any study of their history and behavior inevitably recalls a panoply of Terran legends of the divine trickster bird, which could easily assume a variety of different forms, lead its befuddled enemies into fatal ambush, hoodwink more powerful foes out of valuable treasure, and which served inevitably as an avatar of the gods and goddesses of war. The word Marigi roughly translates as travelers, in the Proto-Creole known as trade language. There's some indication that the word may have other shades of meaning in Marigi dialects which remain untranslated. At this juncture, it's impossible to say how long the Marigi have been capable of traversing long interstellar distances, but biological and archaeological evidence unearthed on Zakaras, Kalkona, Vera, and Mars suggests that the Marigi have been travelers for several millennia. Skeletal remains recovered on Vera have revealed some members of the Marigi species spend their entire developmental lives in space, from late infancy to adulthood, for at least 6,000 years. Artifacts recovered from sites excavated on Zakaris and Mars suggest the Marigi were monitoring and visiting the homeworlds of human and Hyver races for at least 4,000 years before either species went through an industrial revolution. The dramatic site unearthed on Kalkona indicates the Marigi may have attempted to establish residence on the Tarka homeworld for nesting purposes in the past. The modern Marigi are not the pinnacle of technological and military achievement for their species. Ample evidence suggests the current political and technological state of the species in fact represents a significant decline from a peak, which occurred some 10 to 15,000 years ago, when the Marigi Empire seems to have reached its maximal astro-territorial extent, and its pinnacle of archaeological and technological achievement. Ruins dating to this era are still found in some star systems which are not presently held by Marigi colonists and seem to be seldom visited by Marigi fleets. Given that the modern Marigi may be descendants of a more advanced Marigi civilization, and that a great many technological secrets their forebears appear to be lost to them, the technological complex they still possess is quite impressive. Central to this technoculture is a highly advanced skill for building and programming pilotless drones, an uncanny control over gravimetric weapons, and a unique faster-than-light engine called the Void Cutter. This bit about pilotless drones, the Marigi and the Weir are the best at researching artificial intelligence. I think the Marigi are actually slightly better than the Weir at it, if I remember correctly. Void Cutter engine, once engaged, uses a gravimetric focus to warp space-time around the ship to the point where it quickly accelerates to speeds in excess of the speed of light. In so doing, however, the ship appears to create a ripple of disturbance, a bow wave of space-time distortion, which flows around the body of the ship and trails behind it in a wake. This bow wave has several principles which Marigi shipwrights and pilots have learned to take advantage of in the last centuries, the most salient of which is other ships employing a similar engine can enter into the slipstream of a foremost vessel, can join their own bow wave to that of the Weir and achieve faster than light speeds without wasting the majority of their energy to create initial disruption. All ships following the lead vessel in a Marigi flight pattern can devote the majority of their energy towards thrust rather than using it to crack the void. Yeah, well, some of this seems very similar to 40K in that a lot of science fiction is very derivative of other works of science fiction. It's the whole nothing new under the sun idea, right? If you see something cool somewhere else but you want to put a slight twist on it, it's very, very common. 40K wasn't really the originator of many of the ideas that they came up with. 40K is just very well established and had the money to develop on the ideas for prolonged periods of time. The more Marigi vessels are joined into a single flight, the faster the fleet as a whole will move, as the engines of all engines but one will be applied to thrust, while only the lead ship, the Void Cutter, will be devoted the majority of its energy to disrupting the fabric of space-time. Marigi travel slowest alone, and fastest when in large number. This is such a weird and fucked up mechanic. I don't play well with it. It's a very cool idea, but I don't do well. I don't use it very effectively. I've tried playing the Marigi a lot, but I'm just not good with the bird people. Marigi display a mosaic of biological traits loosely associated with reptile, mammal, and avian life forms. They appear to have evolved from an arboreal omnivore and still consume a varied diet, but the emphasis on protein and fat suggests the earliest ancestors may have been ambush predators. Physical traits are expressed differently by males and females of the species, but the sexual dimorphism observed may only be partially biological. A great deal of the divergence between sexes may be caused by cultural practices which significantly shape the bodies of female and male Marigi in very different ways as they develop from infancy to adulthood. The basic Marigi torso is long and serpentine, with a length of approximately 6 meters from nose tip to tail tip in the largest female specimen found to date. Males appear to be significantly smaller, in all cases, reaching a maximum length of 3 meters. There are 8 limbs along the length of the body, 2 pairs of grasping limbs are found in the upper torso, each with opposable digits, and a broad range of motion through shoulder and wrist. The third limb evolved into a great pair of wings during some point, allowing the during Marigi evolution, likely when they were far less massive creatures. This wing pair extends to a wide span in the male and allows him to achieve short bursts of atmospheric flight. The wings appear to be vestigial and useless for flight in the female, but may retain some emotive or display function in social settings, a phenomenon that's been observed in other xenosentients. In both male and female Marigi, a pattern of reptilian scales cover the body. Scales that developed a feather-like consistency over the wing pair and a similar feather plumage is observed on the head and tail. The latter scales are highly colorful in the male and appear to serve a social display purpose. A fourth limb pair above the tail marks the end of the organ cavity and is armed with a larger, more robust set of grasping claws. The prehensile tail extends for a considerable distance, sometimes nearly doubling the length of the body, and in the male of the species sometimes arrayed with an impressive second fan of display plumage. Both male and female Marigi have an elongated skull with a brain volume of over 2,000 cubic centimeters and a beak like proboscis. The proboscis is split into 3 divisions in the male Marigi and an infant Marigi of both sexes. In the female, the lower 2 divisions of the beak break off to fuse into a single bony palate during adolescence. The eyes of both sexes are large, arrayed towards the front of the skull to allow binocular vision and excellent depth perception. The array of tools and rods and cones allows them to see contrast movement and a full spectrum of color, with some extended range into the infrared. The Marigi retain a tapetum? Tapetum? I don't know this word. Lucidum, a reflective layer of tissue in the back of the eye, as well, suggesting they may have originally evolved from a lineage which forested and hunted in low light, as well as full light conditions. The Sword of the Stars 2, the Zool have a religious split, with the return of the Zool Ka turning out to be just giant-ass Leer. Half of the Zool go serve the Zool Ka, or the, god damn it, Sulka, yeah, the names are even so similar. Sulka and Zool, they go to serve the Sulka. The other half go to ally with the Leer in trying to fight off the old gods. And yeah, I don't know. It was weird. I didn't really understand it very well, and the lore for Sword of the Stars 2 didn't really get developed past the starting point because the game was kind of dead on arrival and doesn't play super well and had its development just drop. So we can just pretend the second game never happened, or we can take a look at it later. Along the Serpentine, proboscis. Eternally. The Marigi possess an unusual cardiovascular system. With 4 functioning hearts, 4 pairs of lungs arranged along the length of the body. The organ cavity in both sexes is armored by a long pectoral girdle, which anchors over 70 rib sets, and behaves very much like a second spine. The pectoral spine mirrors the interlocking structure of the dorsal spine, but is wider and more loosely joined. The largest heart-lung pair in the Marigi body cavity is found in the upper torso, just below the uppermost limb set. A second, less robust pump is found below the second limb pair, within a large and powerful third heart just below the wings. A final heart and lungs, Jesus Christ, are found above the final limb set, serving to pump blood to and from the prehensile tail, along with the trachea and alimentary canal leading from the head. There are additional 8 subtly hidden breathing orifices arranged along the body. Apparently, these can be consciously opened or sealed by the Marigi, which chooses to hold its breath for any reason, including additional forays into water. What? Both male and female Marigi are highly intelligent and possess some psionic ability, although this ability is expressed very differently in the 2 sexes. Yeah, except yeah, it's kind of a great schism, like what happens over and over and over in Christian history, but it's a little weird why their faction gets merged with the Leer and gets kind of theocratic. I don't know. I haven't read the lore for Sword of the Stars 2 for SOTS 2 in a long time, so I'm probably misremembering that. The Marigi are divided into 2 biological sexes. Marigi culture mandates that male and female offspring be separated into gender-segregated communities in early infancy. Male Marigi spend their lives in infancy from senescence in space, living aboard nomadic starships, which travel constantly from star to star. Female Marigi are terrestrial creatures for the duration of their lives, raised in full gravity and adapted accordingly to planetary conditions. Although they're known to travel from star to star, they always seek a base for land operations in conditions congenial to life on a planet's surface. The differences in diet, environment, and activity between male and female Marigi lead 2 sexes along 2 very different lines of physical development. Male Marigi are much smaller overall than the average female and have much less robust bone development, especially in weight-bearing members of lower limb sets. They are rarely capable of standing upright in full gravity, but can usually fly for short bursts and glide for longer periods via their large and powerful wings. Overall, avian characteristics of the race are highly emphasized in the male. The bones are extremely light and fragile. The feather scales are longer, larger, and much more brilliantly colored on head, wings, and tail, and often contrast sharply to the scales of the body. The triune beak of infant and adolescent Morigi never fuses in the male of the species, and often remains open throughout adulthood. I think we could, yeah, this is an example of the triune beak that they're talking about, as is this. The dorsal and pectoral spines in the male are much lighter and more flexible. The hearts and lungs are larger and in some cases even hypertrophic, leading to visible bulges in the rib girdle. Nowhere in the sexual dimorphism of the species is more clear than the expression of psionic tendencies. Male Morigi possess a high degree of empathy with other members of their own species and with any other conscious living thing. This faculty greatly facilitates the Morigi ability to communicate, in particular acquire new language skills and cultural fluency as needed, and may go a long way to explain the phenomenon of the so-called Morigi trade language, Proto-Creole, which reflects deep language structures of all known sentients in the sector of the galaxy. Another unusual feature of the Morigi psionic complex is the famous Morigi glamour effect. Also exclusive to the male and likely caused by fierce social competition for mates within the species, over millennia, male Morigi appear to have developed a capacity to attract and lull other creatures via an unusual form of psionic camouflage. Under the influence of a male Morigi's glamour, the victim's brain will spontaneously produce an image of beauty or grace that might normally be associated with desirable male companionship. This effect may be sharpened to an extreme if a victim is biologically female, causing the Morigi to appear, at least briefly, as an extremely attractive male of her species. Although generally, this illusion will be strangely still equipped with wings, and may even be in flight, i.e. Morigi are angels. They're space dolphins. They're badass psychic space dolphins that we're playing as. I kind of wish I'd cut this into individual sections where I talked about each of the races and just post them immediately, but yeah. In contrast to the spacefaring male, female Morigi tend to be much larger in overall body length and mass. In general, females tend to develop reptilian characteristics of the species much more fully. The feather scales of the head, tail, and wing pair are much shorter, less brilliant, display less contrast with the torso. The weight-bearing members of the lower body are much more robust and heavily muscled, allowing for limited bipedalism and rapid movement over horizontal and vertical planes on land. The bones are thicker and heavier, the triune beak becomes more classically avian proboscis in the female, and the lower halves of the split fuse into a single bony palate, which represents a formidable cutting and piercing edge to potential predators in adolescence. Yeah, well, me editing anything is unlikely. I might do it. It's a good idea. I probably won't do it, just because I don't have enough time to do serious editing, and I think it's kind of charming how half-assed the editing process is. I know people would appreciate me editing things more, but I don't know. This is a great opportunity if you're watching this on YouTube. Weigh in below with if you want me to edit shit or not. It'll mean I probably put out about half as much videos, but I could potentially do it. Female Morigi are equipped with 3 uterine organs along the underside of the body, each able to produce a single fertile egg from a given mating event. Any given female may mate with more than one male and produce a separate egg for each father she chooses. Morigi infants are produced in clutches of up to 3 and spend a period of approximately 18 months from laying and hatching to fledging their first feather scales in infancy. When fledgling Morigi sprout their first plumage, males and females are divided. A Morigi mother will typically flag the nearest fleet at this time and offer her sons for ascension to space, while reserving her daughters for terrestrial life with matrilocal tribe. Psionic ability in the female Morigi is expressed much more defensively than the male. Although females invents some... Jesus, the vocabulary of whoever wrote this is enviable. some empathic and communicative ability, it's much less developed and much less common for female Marigi to be capable of creating psionic glamour. They do, however, possess a powerful faculty of psionic resistance, which may have developed over the centuries in some sort of biocultural arms race with the males of their species. Female Marigi are very highly resistant to psionic attacks of persuasion, and there's some evidence they can also deflect or disrupt Lyrian telekinetics. Little is known about social behaviors of pre-stellar Marigi, or the Marigi of the so-called Golden Age. For the past several thousand years, their society has been made up of loosely affiliated and often highly competitive tribes. Once largely independent of one another, today all surviving Marigi have formed a confederation for mutual defense. After recent losses in a war which took place some 100 years ago, modern Marigi look for leadership. Again, here's the thing that happened 100 years ago. A war that took place some 100 years ago. And this bit about deflecting Lyrian telekinetics? Yeah, it's implying this forgotten history a little bit. Modern Marigi look for leadership in a single Marigi war leader, the so-called Morukan. War is an unusual undertaking for modern Marigi. In general, it appears they prefer to use other societies as trading partners rather than engage in military conflict. Given that both male and female Marigi are highly intelligent, highly competitive, and often territorial, it may be inferred that wars were more frequent at some point during their history. Until the past century, however, war amongst their people was unknown, and combat was a relatively bloodless ritual carried out at regular gatherings when tribal groups would come together in certain regions of space. This changed with the arrival of a species the Marigi called the Screamers, i.e. the Sul-Ka. The heart and soul of traditional Marigi culture... Wait a minute. Yeah, I think so. I think that's the Sul-Ka. The heart and soul of traditional Marigi culture has always been the complex relationship between males and females. Each of the two sexes has its own life way and a widely differed realm of social concerns. Female Marigi are traditionally land-bound, have developed a terrestrial hierarchy based on ownership of founded planetary property, industry, and use of capital, and control of physical resources and building of urban environments. I lost my place. Male Marigi are stellar nomads, and have developed a nomadic hierarchy based on the control of vast regions of space, trade routes, and access to desirable area resources, including the privilege of descent to court available females for rights of marriage and economic alliance. This curious division of society has created a complex web of dependence and exchange between the two sexes. Beyond the need to come together for mating and propagation of genes, male and female Marigi are dependent on one another to meet crucial economic and political needs. Marigi female depend on the relationships with allied male fleets to fuel the economy with needed resources and trade goods, as well as to provide defense for their vulnerable world and assert power within the political system. Marigi males depend on their relationship for the Marigi corporate fiefs to build, arm, fuel, provision, and repair spaceships, which assert simultaneously their lives and livelihoods, as well as provide them with the steady supply of new tribesmen. Over the millennia, Marigi have evolved elaborate courtship rituals established to maintain these social, political, economic, and sexual relationships. On the broad social level, female groups strive to build and maintain the cities, colonies, and starships that make them attractive to males, to achieve a steady flow of male traffic and alliance. Marigi females often will build impressive structures to assert their prowess as artists, architects, and scientists, presenting these impressive monuments as evidence of their tribal power. By contrast, male groups will develop their fighting skills in order to give them a good showing at intertribal competition. Trading and navigation skills are also developed to maximal extent. Male Marigi often compete both with the tribal group and more savagely with other tribal groups to seek a more beautiful and exotic item from the most far-flung world to offer females as evidence of their value as traders. The Marigi lust for unusual objects is a strong motivating force within their society. Items from distant planets are sought, exchanged, and avidly collected by both male and female Marigi as fetishes of power. Temples which collect and display these objects are sacred, representing the ultimate expression of tribal identity and the union of male and female groups. A sufficiently rare and precious object can cement a right of marriage between thousands of individuals, male and female, who belong to corresponding tribes. On the individual level, both males and females of the species are considered valuable mating partners if they evince high intelligence and psionic ability. The physical beauty of the male is highly prized, as is the charm, the ability to project and power glamour, speed, and martial ability. Females are valued for strength and wealth, and many males find the most irresistible mates are those who see through them the most easily. This is a sign of high psionic resistance and is highly prized, possibly because such mates and the alliances they represent will be neither easily gained nor easily lost. Dude, I know. For 2 hours and 15 minutes, give or take, I've been talking about this. It is impossible to distinguish between male and female Marigi at birth. And really, the amount I've been reading is a testament to how much fucking lore they put in here. And I really like it. It's dense as fuck, and it's really hard to get through the first time you're playing the game, but it gives context to what the fuck you're doing and who these people are and how you should roleplay your relationship with this different powers and why the AI will act differently depending on who they're playing and yada 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 yada. Whereas Stellaris is just like, haha, generic alien. Female Marigi place equal parenting effort into all infants until a period of fledgling, which occurs 3 years after the female's leathery eggs are laid and hatched. At fledging, the bright colors and highly contrasting scales in the male are immediately obviously, and other sexual characteristics linked to the 63rd chromosome also appear. At this point, the males are separated from their sister clutch to await ascension. On the arrival of the next stellar fleet, Marigi mothers who have given birth to males will offer their fledged sons to be carried aloft. The ritual of ascension is generally a tense moment for all parties involved, as male tribal leaders can be quite ruthless in negotiation before they accept new fledgling males aboard their ships. The atmosphere is somewhat more relaxed if the fleet believes that the fledglings on review are their own sons, but if they have not mated with the females in question, they may demand a heavy payment or promises of future support as dowry of sorts. Accepting an infant into their rank as a tribesman conveys a parental responsibility on the group. The boy must be nurtured, educated, and allowed to advance in the ranks. This can be apparently more difficult if the infant does not show characteristic plumage of the tribe. Wasn't there a 40k mod for Stellaris? I think so. I remember... I don't remember it being very good, to put it politely. 40k mod Stellaris. It's certainly nowhere near as... ambitious or impactful as New Horizons, and I've been horribly spoiled by that mod. Once accepted into the flock, a male Marigi begins training immediately for his responsibilities as an adult. Education includes rigorous training as a pilot and combat specialist, as well as a traditional review of the liberal arts. Upon passage through adolescence and an extended series of proving rituals, a fully fledged Marigi tribesman achieves a minimal competence in the personal and armed combat and spacemanship, and will be expected to acquit himself well at his station aboard any starship, whether he works in the galley, the guns, or commands the fleet. More importantly, from the Marigi perspective, he will learn calligraphy, languages, astronavigation, and familiarize himself with the philosophy, songs, and literature of this people. Achieving this state of education and decorum is necessary in order to be considered a civilized person, and perhaps worthy to descend once as an adult into the company of females, once he has something of worth to offer them. The desire to descend in the Marigi male is a complex one, comprised of equal parts sexual desire, ego, and will to power. It's through descent that males develop economic and strategic relationship with female counterparts. It's how they maintain their genetic heritage, through sons and daughters who form a legacy of blood. In order to descend, however, a male must have a ritual offering in hand. This ritual tribute is called a token. Seeking and crafting his token is often an exercise in personal creativity, personal expression, and personal courage. The archaeological evidence unearthed on Vera is perhaps the most dramatic evidence of the danger of personal risk, which an individual Marigi might be willing to undergo in order to obtain a valuable token. The pilot of the crashed vessel recovered from a deeply buried strata had been collecting early Lyran artifacts from the surface of Mir. Ivory weapons, ornaments, and playthings from the hold of a single-man starship were of a common type in the Lyran Neolithic. Carbon dating of the startlingly well-preserved remains of the pilot confirmed that he became a victim of a stellar mishap over 4,000 years ago. In traditional Marigi society, female Marigi often travel from star to star, preferring to remain planet-bound and hold terrestrial territory. The exception to this rule was an occasion known as the honing. During this ritual, selected female emissaries from various feminine tribes would seek passage from allied male tribes to a place called the Dancing Ground. At this pre-selected gathering point where Marigi homeworlds, the female representatives from many worlds would meet in a council on the planet's surface where the male tribes engage in intensely competitive series of sports in the air and space above. These events were recorded and broadcast to the entire Marigi civilization, with competitions engaging a full gamut of possible battle simulations, single combat in the open air, armored combat on a neighboring moon, classic ship-to-ship dogfighting engagements, and mock battles between entire fleets being the highlight of the spectacle. The result of the competition among the males at the end of the event would set the hierarchy of leadership among and within the otherwise largely egalitarian male tribes for the next cycle. Each cycle being an indeterminate number of years or centuries based on the Marigi's complex galactic calendar. The leader of the most victorious tribal fleet at the Honing Bidmorukan, first among travelers. Until the next competition, females allied to this tribe would gain the privilege and obligation of hosting the next such event, along with the other advantages associated with political leadership. Of the four major xenoarchaeological sites associated with Marigi, the most dramatic is the famous Worm of Damto. Discovered in the dry salt wastes of the continent of Lokris, the Damto salt mine had preserved the physical remains of 14 Tarka and one Marigi female in a state of natural mummification for many thousands of years. It was excavated in the Carcasian year 9087. And the associated artifacts have been on display in the Imperial Museum of Warkis for several centuries. Piecing together an ancient site report with the items still held in curation at the Acrisian capital city of Kugao, it would appear many individuals found in the Damto were all killed when a section of the salt mine collapsed, burying all 14 individuals under many tons of salt and rock. The Marigi, judging by the skeleton equipment, would have been a well-developed adult female. Parts of her skull, left wing, dorsal, and pectoral spines were recovered, as well as 3 long bones. And there are many fragments of metal which were likely some sort of protective armor. The Tarka group consisted of 6 females, 7 adolescent males, and 1 changed male, the latter of which was armed with an impressive bronze spear and warhammer of the Ku dynasty. The remains of 3 females and 4 of the adolescent males were heavily scorched as if they'd been subjected to partial immolation. Taken in context with other archaeological finds and current knowledge from Marigi territorial wanderings, the Worm of Damto raises a number of disturbing questions. It's an indisputable fact there's no creature in the fossil record of Old Earth, Okuma, Choktopra, or Mur which possess the mosaic of traits common to Marigi males and females. Nonetheless, creatures with a striking resemblance to Marigi seem to have cropped up repeatedly in legends, art, and iconography of all 4 species. All 4 species have at least one word, and sometimes several words, for dragon. These words almost always immediately spring to mind upon seeing a live Marigi for the first time. Some dragons in the local legends of all 4 species were interested in collecting treasure, and are often depicted enthroned upon massive beds of precious metals, art, or gems. In other cases, divine messengers seem to have exercised profound influence over political and religious leaders, even to have established some sort of domination over a historical population, as in the feathered serpent legends of Old Earth and Choktopre. It seems distinctly possible at this sitting that ancient Marigi visitors may have established outposts, trade, and even imperial control over historic populations of human, Hiver, Lear, and Tarka. At present, however, the Worm of Damto is the only direct evidence for this hypothesis. The Zuwigi War. For several thousand years, the relationship between the Marigi and other sentient species seemed to have been largely peaceful, centered on limited cultural exchange and trade. In the past century, however, the Marigi have suffered catastrophic losses in a war with an enemy they call the Zuwigi. Zuwigi, very similar to Zul, very similar to Zulka. Analysis of bone fragments recovered from the surface of Iridia 5 and the pilot of the vessel recovered on Vera reveal an indisputable genetic similarity between the two. At this point, it seems very clear the outpost destroyed in Iridia must have been a small Marigi colony. So the Iridia 5 colony, the one that the Zul were born out of, is the fucking Marigi. The Marigi were introduced by an expansion pack later on. I lost my place. God damn it. Similar attacks may have been launched by Species X, the creator of the Zool, on multiple Marigi worlds. There is also evidence of combat and desecration of ancient Marigi monuments, which may have taken place at roughly the same time. Modern Marigi tribesmen are tight-lipped on the subject of the enemy, but the so-called Zuigi are also known as the Screamers in some of their transmissions. Mounting evidence suggests, however, Species X, known as the Zool as the Great Masters, and the Marigi as the Screamers, and the Lear as the Sul-Ka, were a powerful military and technological force in the sector at one of the galaxy until a relatively short time ago. Finding the former homeworld and colonial outpost of the star-faring species, which appears to have disappeared practically overnight, is an urgent priority for all intelligent agencies. Species X was in fact destroyed by biological warfare, as their Lyrian enemies claim. They left behind an incalculable wealth of infrastructure, technology, and scientific knowledge. The first species to find and back engineer the remnants of their civilization might gain a key advantage over competing species. Oh, hallelujah, we are done with that. Oh, it only took 2.5 hours, so I'm putting in a cut here. If you're watching this on YouTube, I'm gonna drink water. I'm probably gonna get more water, and then I'm actually gonna click the fucking launch button. But until then, YouTube, I'm gonna say this is it for today. Thanks for stopping by. Until next time, make sure to comment, share, like, subscribe, all that silly shenanigan. Until then, toodaloo, take care. I will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.